Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Make a start for this evening's Strategic Planning and Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. Item 1 on the agenda is decisions to agree the decisions of the previous meeting. I'm not aware of any outstanding. 2, apologies for absence. I've got apologies for Councillor Riddick. Councillor Deacon has apologised for not being in the room, but he has joined us online, so he can't actually. He disappeared again. DD. He's still there, but he can't actually vote, but he's certainly online. We're missing Councillor Patterson. Apologies for Councillor Patterson, unless anybody's aware he's attending late. Any other apologies? No. Item 3, declarations of interest. Has anybody got any declarations of interest? Public participation. We have one member of the public on the screen. Item 5, consideration of any matter of court in relation to court. Unfortunately not with this agenda. Item 6, conservation area character appraisals. Here are my figures for Philip. I hand over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And thank you for this opportunity to present the 3 latest conservation area character appraisals. This report seeks to take the appraisals for Longmarston, Wheelstone and Ringshaw through to Cabinet and ultimately to adoption. There is a statutory duty on the borough to review conservation areas from time to time, and these 3 are part of a suite of conservation appraisals that have already been completed, are in the process or are planned in the coming years. So conservation areas must have a definite architectural quality or historical interest to merit designation. And I think we can all recognise the important contribution conservation areas make to the quality of lives of residents. And it's not just the beautiful buildings and the high quality areas, but they also provide that reference point in a rapidly changing world. But these appraisals are not about preventing development. Change is inevitable, change is often beneficial, but these documents are therefore more about recognising what makes these areas special, what defines their significance, and therefore what are the qualities within the conservation areas, what are the weaknesses, and this information guides decision making. It allows for a robust analysis of the significance. It informs planning decisions, and it helps officers defend planning appeals. So these 3 conservation area character appraisals have all been through a consultation process. Ringshaw, which was carried out, I must recognise, with the huge support of Little Gaddesden Parish Council, had 20 responses. There are no changes proposed to the boundary. Longmarston had 14 responses, and there is a proposed boundary change extending to include the fields to the south of Chapel Lane and west of Station Road. And Wheelstone had 23 responses. A boundary extension is also proposed to incorporate the buildings at Great Farm. I do think, having looked today, and I do apologise, I think the version and the appendices may well be the version prior to the amendments, but all the amendments are detailed within the report, other than there was some typos or spelling mistakes. So the appraisals are before members in the appendices. So I'm happy to take any further questions, Chair.
Councillor Mitchell was first by shorthand.
I was wondering what percentage of the population the responses were, as opposed to the number of respondees, you know.
So the local population. Well, it would have been a minute percentage. When we look at less than 14, 20 or 23 responses against the size of these settlements, which will at least be in the hundreds.
Yeah, just slightly disappointing that it's not higher, but I think it's a great piece of work, Philip, so I'm not opposed to it at all.
Councillor Timmis.
Yes, I agree. It's a good, great piece of work, lots of photos, which is very helpful. Two issues I'd like to raise. One is on page 57, which shows inappropriate landscaping and boundary treatment. This is people putting paving into their front gardens to park cars and things, and this happens a lot in the villages. And I'm not aware that people put in a planning application for this, or do they, is this just something that they can do anyway, even in a conservation area? That's one question.
Yeah, so in front gardens there are limitations on what you can do in terms of hard surfacing. You can't do more than 5 square metres without a planning application, unless you can allow that the water to drain away naturally on site. So in terms of hard surfacing, permitted development rules, it's less about the appearance and character of the area, and it's more about preventing the flow of water onto the highway, causing localised flooding in. But there are, yes, so generally, unless they have on-site drainage, hard surfacing is limited to 5 square metres without needing.
Is that, sorry to jump in, is that in conservation areas or out of the, or regardless of conservation areas?
And so that would be regardless, I'm sure. I can double check.
Sorry, Councillor, just thought that point needed to be checked on. Whilst you two are looking that up, my guess would be from experience that rule about 5 square metres and drainage applies across the whole piece. And when you get to a conservation area, you then get conservation issues coming into play, but I'm happy to be corrected on that.
Yeah, there's no additional restriction in conservation. No, there's no additional restrictions in relation to conservation.
Fine, thank you. Councillor Timmis.
Well, just to continue, on that particular page, you've got a picture there of suburban style block paving, and it's obviously a big slope, so it would obviously, the water would all just sweep away, wouldn't it? I'm aware that in the villages that I represent, in particular Markyate, lots of people are putting in solid tarmac or whatever in front of their houses in order to be able to park cars, because again, parking is a huge issue. That's an issue in all the conservation areas, I think. It makes it very difficult. The more houses you build, the more cars there are, and of course most of the older houses and so on don't have garages. So I just think this is something I've never seen, a planning application for a driveway. Some of these driveways, I'm not talking about driveways to a big house or something like that, I'm talking about driveways on housing. So that's one issue. And the other, there's a list here of the villages that you're completing this survey of, and you haven't got Plancy on that list, which surprised me.
Yeah. So, so the issue of hard surfacing, I think the point here is that if very often they do have an acrid rain or it flows, the driveway would flow into a flower bed. So although there's an area of hard surfacing, there is an on-site drainage mechanism. Where there isn't, and it's more than 5 square metres, then that is a breach of planning control. But we do rely, I guess, on the eyes and ears of the public to inform us, and we do have each year enforcement cases relating to this very matter. and we can take action. I guess the important thing about the appraisals is that we recognise in that area that this is an issue, and therefore that gives us weight if we were to take action. Should there be a breach and we want to take action, having this appraisal gives us that extra tool to defend enforcement cases of that ilk. So that's the benefit of recognising these important features in character appraisals. In terms of Blamstead, this will be so yes, we've gone through.
We made a list. I can't remember where it is.
Yes, that's right. It's on the third page of my report. So Blamstead would be page 9.
So it wasn't with the list of the. You had a list of villages that you were surveying or looking at, and a whole list of all the villages, including Mark Yates and Great Gasson, but not Flamstead.
No, that's correct. There's 25 conservation areas in total, and the conservation team is a very small team, and the vast majority of their work is spent responding to planning application. So it's a very important part of their role in terms of this project work and this ongoing appraisals. Flamstead will be part of the programme, and I've tasked the manager of the specialist services team that encompasses conservation when he has to draft a new conservation strategy, and that will provide a programme for the outstanding conservation areas, including Flamstead.
There were other parishes not on the list as well, or other conservation areas in other parishes that weren't on the list. So it's not just Flamstead that's been left out. It's just these are the ones that they're currently working on. Councillor Mitchell's trying to get one.
Ties in. I was just going to ask about Pickett's End not being on the list.
Yeah. I think that the process was to ensure that the largest settlements were covered first in terms of, I think, Berkhamsted and Hemel and Tring. I think that there was originally also some alphabetical order. We've also recently had a lot of support from Little Gaddesden. So in terms of bringing forward Little Gaddesden and Ringshaw, that was made possible thanks to the support of that parish council. So I guess there are opportunities to follow that model. We'd be interested to speak to the parishes in terms of the support they can provide if they want to bring their particular areas forward.
Very briefly, going back to the point that Councillor Timmis made, not long after this requirement for planning permission for 5 square metres for hard standings came in, I remember making an enforcement request for a case in my ward. And there the drive was sloping onto the highway, and you'd think water drain. The thing was, though, they had a drain at the bottom of the drive on their land, which was their drain, so that therefore it didn't count. It wasn't actually flowing onto the highway, so that's how they didn't need planning permission in that particular case. So I just thought I'd bring that up to warn other members that they don't fall into that trap. Any other questions? Councillor Mitchell and then Councillor Chapter.
Just a quick one. Is architecture under the ground covered in a conservation area? Because you mentioned it must have architecture, historical architecture.
So I guess is the question of our archaeological features.
Yeah, so if you had something in an area that might be just outside the boundary, like one of these satellite areas you mentioned in the report, would that be covered if it had significant?
Yeah, that's likely to be covered under the separate areas of archaeological significance. So,
or are you thinking of wine cellars, Councillor Mitchell?
I was thinking more like Roman villas in my ward, even though that's not.
Sorry, trust me to lower the tone. Councillor,
yeah, just a quick one on page 167. I was looking at the survey, and then question 1 is the long master questionnaire. Question 1, I couldn't see the end of the question and what that gets. Do you agree with the following? Or to what extent do you agree with the following statement? I can't see the statement on there. I just wondered what that was and whether that could be updated.
sample of which.
What, page 167?
As a whole, yeah. What's been discussed there? Or, yeah, no, we recognised, unfortunately, the way that software worked, it did cut out the question at the end of the question, so we included it.
I could see the end of the longer questions further down. I can see that.
Yeah, but we have, yeah, it is in Appendix 5, but it does say, when looking at the conservation area as a whole, please say to what extent you agree or disagree with the following statements. And then there's the whole series. There's a right balance of uses within the conservation area. The buildings are generally in a good condition.
Okay, so I think it's the uses.
The uses, right.
Yeah. So it's the first one, yeah. Yeah, the right balance of uses within the conservation area has been cut out.
Thank you.
Any other questions? In which case, on behalf of the committee, I'll enter the comment that we're grateful to the effort that's been put into this. And welcome all three appraisals going forward to Cabinet shortly. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. On those ones. Item 7. I have received a request that the committee deal with both 7 and 8 at the same time. Is everybody happy with that? Saves having the same presentation twice. So if I could hand over to those of you, I can't pronounce the surname, I'm sorry Philippa, who leads the Hemel Gardens project, and Natalie Bateman beside her, who are the two leading lights, as far as I'm aware, of the Hemel Gardens community project, which has been running for some time now. If I could hand over to you to present the two items for members.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Philippa Gembar, and I'm the Programme Director, and I'm joined by Natalie, who's the Programme Manager. Just by way of introduction to both item 7, the Framework and Transport Supplementary Planning Document, but also relevant to item 8, the Stewardship and Placemaking Supplementary Planning Document, I'd just like to make some overarching context. The emerging draft local plans for both St Albans and Dacorum Borough are both at the examination stage currently, and each contains specific policies for Hemel Garden communities, including reference to the need for 2 supplementary planning documents which would address the framework and transformation and stewardship. And the overarching objective of those supplementary planning documents is to supplement the policies within the plan, providing further, more detailed guidance, both for application preparation but also for development management purposes. And a joint hearing was held by inspectors on the strategic policies for Hemel Garden communities back in October, with inspectors recommending wording should reference them having regard to those emerging supplementary planning documents. More recently, on the 27th of November, the government issued new guidance on plan making, and this includes that supplementary planning documents in support of local plans being progressed under the transitional arrangements, so that's both the Dacorum and St Albans plan, are required to be adopted by the 30th of June. So we now have a new deadline for adopting any supplementary planning documents. Just to note the geographical coverage of those proposed supplementary planning documents, and this reflects the programme area for Hemel Garden communities, which includes the growth areas both to the north and the east of the town, but also the new developments coming forward within the existing urban area. And the SPDs would apply, therefore, to the local plan site allocations, including the growth areas, but also the strategic sites for Polehanger and Shendish, and the opportunity areas for Maylands and Hearts IQ, but also windfall sites. And in the case of the stewardship strategy, those would apply to sites over a certain scale, so probably around 50 to 75 dwellings. We're conscious that some of these applications have already been submitted or in pre-application discussions, and therefore time is of the essence for the adoption of any supplementary documents. Should we wish those policies to capture those emerging sites and developments. I'll now hand over to Natalie, who will present the headlines for the Framework and Transformation document. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the role of the Framework and Transformation Supplementary Planning document includes the need to build upon the joint Hemel Garden communities policies in both local plans, and that's for Dacorum and St Albans, with clear programme area-wide expectations. It also sets out expectations for applicants and development management officers with a checklist which is tailored to each site, supporting a faster and more transparent planning system. Provides requirements related to infrastructure, phasing, funding and delivery, explains transformation and the areas of focus for applicants and authority requirements, which also help to achieve transformational outcomes, such as behaviour change, and also supporting the local plan policies and the infrastructure delivery plans for both of those authorities. It also provides strategic design coding on a site-by-site basis across Hemel Hempstead site allocations and opportunity areas, helping create well-designed and sustainable places. And once adopted, the supplementary planning document would be a material consideration for application determination, providing clarity to developers on what is expected. So for ease of use, and I'm sure you've probably seen that there's a number of documents associated with this framework and transformation plan, but it has actually been organised into two parts, Part A and Part B. Part A deals with the strategic topics across the programme area, and there are sections within that, A1, A2 and A3. A1 consists of introduction and outlining the purpose, objectives and the approach of the framework and transformation, SPD, as well as how to use Part A and Part B. A2 sets out the challenges and opportunities for different sites across the town, with applicant and authority requirements to ensure infrastructure is delivered, funded and monitored. And there is also further detail on HMO1 specifically, which is the growth area for Dacorum, and it actually splits out the infrastructure requirements into 4 sub-areas. A3 explains what transformation means and the infrastructure and projects related to it, and they're categorised into 3 themes. So green and blue infrastructure, transport and mobility, and placemaking. And there are additional requirements in there for applicants and authorities. This section also includes specific design guidance for the Nicky line and the Green Loop to support any improvements undertaken by the authorities and also developers. Part B is site specific and sets out strategic design coding for those sites. Part B1 is the introduction and instructions on how to use books 1 to 5. Books 1 to 5 then follow, providing strategic design coding for the growth areas in book 1, Dacorum Borough Council strategic sites in book 2, the town centre opportunity areas in book 3, Two Waters opportunity area in book 4, and other Dacorum Borough Council sites and Windfall in book 5. It's also supported by 2 appendices, the glossary of terms and the applicant's checklist, which is to be completed as part of the planning application process. So this slide sets out some examples of the applicant and authority delivery requirements, which includes must-haves and should-haves. So a must-have indicates a requirement of the applicant or the authority. So applicants and authorities must comply with these elements to be considered policy compliant. These are essential to delivering the intended quality, functionality and character of development. A should-have indicates a strong recommendation, and if these aren't met, then there should be some clear justification as part of that planning application. The slide provides some examples of what the applicant and authority requirements look like in the document. The top 2, so the first pink box and the buff-coloured one, are related to section A2 and strategic infrastructure requirements, and the bottom 2 are in section A3 with regard to delivering transformation. This slide provides examples of the strategic design coding in Part B that is helping to deliver the quality of place through the strategic design coding books for each of the areas. Each book is guided by the same quality of place themes that I've mentioned earlier. Green and blue infrastructure examples shows a must for a landscape-led approach to master planning. The transport and mobility example shows a must to provide bus stops in certain locations. And the placemaking example gives an example of a must to deliver appropriate density of development that also respects the character of the location and strengthens the street scene. This is further explained with the use of cross-sections like the one that's shown on the bottom of the slide, showing the topography from Roughdown Common through to Lake Buzzard Road. So the next steps for this SPD is to work towards adopting it ahead of the government's 30th of June deadline. If we don't achieve this, there will be less planning weight to guide strategic planning applications across Hemel Hempstead and achieve the Hemel Garden community's aims. We're keen to hear your feedback tonight and those of Planning Policy and Climate Change Committee at St Albans next week. They'll be considering a version of this SPD relevant to their district. And also the Stewardship and Placemaking SPD as well. Other key next steps include Cabinet on the 3rd of February, subject to your comments and endorsement of the SPD. Public consultation is planned for early February for 6 weeks, and a report back to Cabinet on consultation outputs and proposed amendments with adoption in the summer. Final slide relates to the recommendation that was in the report. So I've just end my slides on this point. So subject to your feedback, we would like to progress to Cabinet on the 3rd of February with a recommendation that the SPD is approved for public consultation purposes.
Natalie. Whew, not a small subject then. Questions? Or straight through to observation, Councillor Santamaria.
Are we coming on to the stewardship section now?
No, this is just framework and transformation SPD.
Stewardship to follow.
Stewardship to follow, which I know will be a subject with lots of
And
questions.
there was another hand, no, I'm imagining it. Any other questions, comments, Councillor Thames?
I don't know which section this is in actually. Just know page 380. Don't know if that's in this section, is it?
It is in this section, yeah.
Right. That it relates to something that I have an issue about in all these plans, and that is how well highways. I'm assuming that you're guided by highways from the point of view of access, on road access.
Yeah.
And it mentions here on page 80 Holtsmere Lane as being an access for the neighbourhood too, I think. It actually, I can't believe anyone's actually looked at that lane. It is so narrow. It's like a lane in Cornwall, only probably even narrower. So it certainly isn't a suitable lane for access. And you mention it going down to, I can't remember the name of the lane now, but the lane that it's going down to is again another quite dangerous lane, and it floods. So I think I feel that there's not enough diligence done about road access in many cases. That's one issue. Am I allowed to ask another?
Yeah, please.
And again, I'm not sure. I presume this is in the same area. On page 521, is that within 521?
That is just for this one, yeah. I'm not sure what it is specifically because there are many pages.
It's about the number of traveller and gypsy sites that are in the plan, and it says that that there are 5 and 8, and that's in 2 different sections, and that this is positive, should have a positive impact on this group, and that there will be more than enough. Now, I have just attended a DMC meeting a few weeks ago where we were discussing traveller sites, and the planning officer said there was a need for 71 sites. So to my mind, there was no evidence for this. Now, I just want to know whether this is the evidence base for the need of these number of sites, or whether there's something else, because we've got a number of sites popping up, sometimes retrospectively throughout Dacorum at the moment. So I would like to question whether whether that is a decision made on evidence, or or not, and whether it's happening elsewhere that we've got problems with sites popping up and being, I'm not saying they're popping up, that they're popping up retrospectively or legally, but there's the cited number of need is it contrasts considerably with this.
Shall I take your latter question on Gypsy and Traveller sites first? So the site itself and the detail that's on that page, I haven't got it in front of me. It would take quite a while to actually find it specifically. I can come back to you. But do you know whether it is related to sites within Dacorum or St Albans?
Yes, Dacorum.
It's definitely Dacorum. So it's just to say that in terms of the evidence that relates to the need, that is in the justification for the local plan. So the local plans has, for St Albans and for Dacorum, has recently been published. So there will be evidence documents on Gypsy and Traveller requirements and the need for those specific sites. They tend to be the large numbers of the pitches, though, and the sites might be slightly smaller. So most...
We're talking about pitches here, I think.
Right, yes. So, and they've been identified by the spatial planning teams in both of the authorities as to where those sites, those pitches will come forward.
Yes, what I'm saying is there's a complete disparate consideration of the number that we're now being told needed and the number that's in the plan. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Sorry, before we move on, Councillor Ross, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Councillor Simmons is talking about is where we've got we've got a report that's the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment, which supports the local plan, that identifies around about 50 pitches as part of that, and obviously some of those are part of the Hemel Community Scheme. The government changed the definition of Gypsies and Travellers to include a broader number of potential people that would be covered by that, and the assessment therefore had an additional number of about 20 or so, so that's where the 70 comes from, but the plan needs to catch up in relation to that. But in terms of the Hemel communities, that's what's been deemed appropriate to deliver within those sites. So yes, it's not delivering all of the need in the borough, but it's delivering some of it.
I think that's something that I'd like to take up with you, because I know I've read all the government definitions of travellers and gypsies, and for you to explain how it's been widened. But I still feel that this is completely out of sync, and therefore what's in the plan isn't realistic.
We'll let you take that offline, I think. That's the best solution. Councillor Gale's next, and then Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to see that open spaces are considered in the area. I'm looking particularly at the neighbourhood 6, which is near my ward, of course. In terms of some feedback from residents, I haven't managed to show this to all the residents, of course, because I only had it a relatively short time. But I know that there are flooding problems and there's issues with water drainage around there, and that's what comes up quite a lot when considering things. So I don't know how that feeds into this this SPD and how that these probably ought to be taken into account, because there are certain elements where developments have been put up in areas which has been historically been flood plains. And the other thing is perhaps overlapping perhaps with the next section is to do with public open space. I'm very pleased with the idea of public open space and ranges of leisure and sports facilities, which are all excellent. Just making sure, wondering just to make sure that those sports facilities are truly open to the public and not, what happens is sometimes, and I think this has happened, something has started off being free and open to the public, but then of course, once it starts needing maintained, locks go on, and then it becomes a sort of semi-public, public like a public school in this country kind of situation, which is not quite colleague, and I've had feedback about it from people who slightly resent the fact that they've been sold this wonderful new facility, which then a little bit down the line has kind of become a little bit exclusive. So I just hope that can be dealt with.
Okay, I'll answer the first one, and then Philippa might like to answer the second point about accessibility. So in terms of flooding and water drainage, the local plan undertakes a strategic flood risk assessment. So this is like a layered approach. The local plan makes sure it assesses all the sites that are put forward as part of the local plan process. But then when you actually have the planning applications come forward, further work has to be done on flood risk assessment, like the detailed modelling of the site and what the mitigation will be. So we're probably at that stage now, is looking at that mitigation through the planning applications. So for land east of Hemel Hempstead, that planning application has been submitted now to St Albans, and we're still awaiting the other application for H1, which is north of the Redbourne Road in Hemel Hempstead. But I'm quite sure that you're probably referring to, is it the Leverstock Green area and the strategic, the flood risk?
Yes, that's right.
Flooding on those recent sites.
Yeah, the very recent. I think it's. I've forgotten the name. Sorry.
St Margaret's or on Bit Road and Green Lane, that area there.
Yes, that sort of area around Westwick and Greendale. Yeah.
Yes, so there's been many conversations actually with county in their strategic function as advising of what is suitable.
It's King Cup I was thinking of, yeah, and next to King Cup, that area.
So this guidance that we've got in here sort of builds upon all of that evidence, and it's just more the detail, so making sure that we are providing the right quality and functionality in those spaces. So the design coding specifically would take account of those points in further detail, but within the growth areas around Leverstock Green, so that would be that book 1 in the SPD.
Yeah. Just forgive me, you said the planning applications have already gone in, but this presumably interposes that, doesn't it? This will act retrospectively on planning applications already gone in.
That's a tricky point. So it depends on when the local plan is adopted and what planning weight supplementary planning documents have at that time. Currently, because it's land east of Hemel Hempstead and it's St Albans local plan, they are further ahead than Decorum, so there is more weight. So as soon as the inspector shares their modifications to the local plans, then there is significant weight. So the planning applications have been worked up in line with these emerging SPDs, so we have been sharing information with the developers as we've been moving forward so that they can align as much as possible. But there is, I guess, a greater issue with the other sites within the town where we haven't had that opportunity to do that alignment with the developers, and some of those applications are likely to come through soon. And some of them already have, so for Polehanger Lane, for instance.
So if an application has already come through before this is approved and published, this has no effect on it?
No. But there are a lot of sites. There are a lot of sites. So in terms of our programme, it runs to 2050. We have the 17 sites that are within Decorum, plus we have the growth area sites, and they'll be coming forward in phases as well. So there's a lot of benefit from it, but you need a local plan to actually hang an SPD off.
I would argue it's not it may be the answer is no from an enforcement point of view, but I think 99.9% of developers would actually welcome it and take the comments in it on board, because it helps them to produce a better development. But you certainly don't have the stick, though, unfortunately.
No, you don't have the stick.
So the land sort of to the east of Hemel, in Hemel Garden communities, there are some planning applications which are already in and some are not not in, yeah.
So land east of Hemel Hempstead is 4,000 homes and runs from the southernmost tip all the way up to the Hemel Hempstead Redbourne Road. And we have been working with that developer, which is the Crown Estate, quite closely. So, and as I said, so as part of the PPA and the pre-application process, we have been sharing this supplementary planning document and guidance. So they are working as closely with us as possible.
Yep.
So we're quite fortunate with that.
Does the accessibility question relate more to the stewardship?
I think it probably was, yeah.
Yes, it does.
Can we park that question? As we go.
Well, we will park. I have another question on stewardship, but yes.
Yeah, Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you. Just, I mean, this is obviously a very well thought out, lots of work's gone into this. It looks makes a lot of sense, but just the perennial concern of it being, risking it being motherhood and apple pie when it comes to things like infrastructure, over which we have no levers that we can pull. So I don't know if there are any comments you can make to reassure us, because when it comes to planning, if Herts County Council, or whichever council it will be in 2+ years' time, says that road is accessible, building on what Councillor Tim has said, or the flooding is not going to be a problem because Thames Water or whatever it says that isn't, even though we know residents say it's a problem, we know that road's bad access because we know the area, but we have to take the experts. So in those situations, I mean, how much weight is this really going to have on those musts and shoulds with the infrastructure of the parts? So the planning design, the green spaces, all that sort of stuff, when it comes to that's all guiding the planning committee and the development, so we have much more weight over that. And I understand that. As things stand now, I don't know what the arrangements will be when we go unitary, obviously, but just if there's anything you can say, because again, it's not a criticism at all of this piece of work, but it's just, as I say, it's the perennial problem that we have at the district council level. On those really important infrastructure, and you're thinking that the two strategic sites, which were not actually in earlier versions of the local plan, have been kind of forced upon us, that really from a local point of view for access and traffic and all that sort of things, we wouldn't ideally have put housing there. So just taking those two as an example, for example, yeah, any thoughts on that really, on the infrastructure? And that includes drains, it includes roads, it includes transport and schools and GP surgeries, all those things that we don't have any control over. Thanks.
So there are sort of two sides to make sure you deliver the right outcomes. I would say it's through the planning application and the DM officers being able to use this document, so it's usability, and then it's the ongoing relationships that we have with developers and making sure that there is a team to have those conversations and to track and monitor all the infrastructure requirements. So inspectors have flagged those particular points at the examination, that there's a need for that. And there is the intent that is set out within St Albans local plan, that we would have that in place. So it would be like an infrastructure working group across the authorities, including the county council, and making sure that we are monitoring it. And we have got team resources to do that for the time being. So we will be doing that as part of the three authorities, or as part of a unitary in the future. And yeah, in terms of usability, we've worked with DM to make sure that the checklist we've got in here will work for DM officers, and also capture sort of a summary of what it is that the developers have got to do. So it's really clear to them when the application is put in which aspects they're supporting and those that need further justification. So I believe we've done as much as we can do, but it's not an easy task because it's a big document, there's a lot to it, it's multifaceted, it's very much part of the local plans, and how those policies are monitored by the local plans team. So it's not just us and our responsibility for HTC, it is the authorities' responsibilities to make sure we deliver this infrastructure as well.
I just have to, I mean, I agree with you, you've done as much as you can with as far as your level can go, but we still ultimately will be at the mercy of others, I think.
One final point, there is quite a complex IDP, an infrastructure delivery plan that has been worked up to 2050, so it goes beyond the local plans to set out all of the infrastructure requirements, covering 10 broad themes.
I'm aware of
So,
that, but
yeah.
setting up infrastructure requirements doesn't mean those infrastructure requirements are going to be built by
No,
somebody
it's
else.
the monitoring of it.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, I won't
Right.
progress the thing, but I just thought should add that just so we don't forget it, which I'm sure we don't.
Quite a few people to speak suddenly. Councillor Mitchell's next.
I think you mentioned that one of the strategic site plans has come in for Polhanger Lane, and I'd just like reassurance that mitigations are planned in for the significant flooding that is like a running river off of the site into Colsa Close, that there are plans in place to mitigate that, and it would be nice to know more specifically what that is if someone wants to contact me after the meeting. And also, again, just reiterating about the significant infrastructure concerns there with the roads and schools and GP services as well.
did you want to say anything about Polhanger at all?
I think I'm not up on the full detail, but we can certainly take that away, and either myself, Phil, or the case officer will come back to you, and we can have a conversation about that. That's right. So
there's some video footage of that flooding, and it's literally is like a running river through Colsa Place, and it leaves silt behind. It's that, you know, it's that bad.
I can
Having any feedback from that, if that could be sent to us.
I can just provide a bit of an update because I am included in sort of the developer conversations as well with DM. So there will be a need for an environmental statement which is going to focus on water and ecology. So there's a piece of work which will be done, but in terms of aligning with these SPDs, that's quite tricky because their application came in last July, so ahead of these SPDs.
Okay, it's good to hear about ecology because, of course, it's just above the Halsey Field
Yeah.
local wildlife site.
Yeah.
Next up is Councillor Deacon. Councillor Deacon, can you hear us?
I certainly can. Can you hear me?
Just a bit louder.
I'll find out where my mic is.
That's better.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Fine. Firstly, apologies. There's been a bug going around the Deacon House over the weekend, and I was hoping to shake that off by now. So, but my question is: it was a fantastic document. A lot of hard work and excellent work's gone in, and it may be me, but early on in the Two Waters area, there was a list of like concerns, and I don't think I saw a concern about traffic and, you know, the traffic congestion. I may be wrong. If this report is not referring to that and that's someone else's responsibility, if this is going out for consultation, especially to the public, then you might want to make that clear, because I'm sure many residents from the Two Waters area will be bringing that up.
Okay. Yeah. So, Councillor Deacon, that might have been a piece of work that fed into this, which a colleague was leading on along with the spatial planning team. So I would need to find out specifically, but I can sort of give you some assurance that the transport vision and strategy and the HGC information on transport has been fed into this SPD. So we're making sure that we deliver that mode share shift. And in terms of Two Waters, the London road that runs from Two Waters into Apsley is on the key network. So there is a route where there would be expectations to have higher patronage of buses and active travel. And there would be consideration for high volume of traffic in those areas, because I think we are well aware of it. It would have come up very early on in the Hemel Hempstead transport study work.
Councillor Stevens.
Yep. Thanks. A couple of points on this. It's a huge report, tremendous amount of work on this, and very impressive. The point is that here we are talking about applications that are coming through now, which will be near-term developments, which are being captured by what we've got in our existing plan and our near-term plan. This is a high-level document which takes us out to 2050, right? The Crown Estates developments, when will they start coming on stream? Because from what I can see, it's somewhere out in time.
So in terms of the timing, is it 20?
So, it's towards the end of the 5-year period, so towards the end of 2029, 2030 is the first expectation of housing on site.
Right. By which time we should have a new plan in place, and these SPDs, etc., will bite, basically.
Well, not if the planning application has already been approved.
But they'll be subject to RMs, presumably. It will be detailed at this stage.
So I think Natalie touched on earlier, so we need the local plans to be in place for the supplementary planning document to come in place. We also need the supplementary planning documents to be adopted by the end of June to take that basis, otherwise we're into the next plan, because the SPDs can't actually stand on their own without the local plan. So we do need those building blocks in place. But they, if in the unforeseen event that those targets are not met, then these documents will continue into the next local plan as well. So it will cover a much more extended time period beyond that.
Right. Okay.
Well, I was going to, briefly, Councillor Timmis, then Councillor England, because
Thank you. Brilliant piece of work. Very briefly, page 436, which is about the hospital site. Is this site dependent on a new medical hub being built down on Market Square?
Probably have to look at the detail that's on that page specifically. I think if it's just referring to residential development coming forward on that site.
It's residential. It shows sort of an area partly residential, mostly residential. Yes, the idea is a conversion of the old Hemel Hospital.
Yes.
But
is it dependent?
Is it dependent on that other one going through? Because if not, what is going to happen in terms of having some substantial medical facility in Hemel?
I think it's part of the plan. It sort of sets out that would be housing and that site would be health facilities.
What site, sorry?
So the Market Square site is also in there.
Yes, I can see it there, but what I wanted to know was, interdependent, supposing that doesn't get okayed.
Yep, go for it.
So as far as I recall, the allocation for the hospital site is kind of flexible to the extent that if the health facility is provided on Market Square and there's no longer a need for health provision on that site, then that site can come forward for housing. If the NHS deem that they still need provision on the hospital site and Market Square didn't come forward, then obviously they'd need to align that with what development can come forward on the site. So that might be lesser housing with medical provision or other. That depends on the NHS's need and what they decide at the time.
So it depends on the NHS?
Yeah, because it's their land. So.
Yeah. And they have changed their minds quite a lot.
Yes, I know, yes.
Councillor England, briefly, please.
Yeah, okay, briefly, just Councillor Hobson, your point about infrastructure. The reason we're trying to, this administration has brought forward the Reg 18 and then the Reg 19, notwithstanding all the new government, NPPF and that whole story that we should all know, is in order to be able to have control of infrastructure in this borough or in this part of whatever the successful authority is. Unfortunately, it's the nature of planning that you don't have control of things if other things have already happened. So we have tried as hard as we can to get the local plan adopted. I think there was possibly a scenario in which the plan might have been adopted by near enough now, but some things slip. and things need to be done properly. But in essence, it's as simple as that. The local plan is a difficult thing to get through, but it's absolutely necessary if we are to have what you call proper control of the things that all of our residents want us to have control of.
Thank you, Councillor England. I've saved myself the last question. I'll try and keep it brief. I've been a big fan of this project for a long time, more than I care to remember, and I'm really pleased to see it getting to these later stages where it's actually something's happening, as it were, rather than talking about it. But I'm kind of torn because I have been outvoted. The council did decide to include one of the strategic sites that's referred in here against my wishes. And I still remain implacably opposed to HM11 at Shendish Manor. And my question, almost under that heading, is there a danger of the Hemel Gardens Community Project being denuded by stretching itself over a too large area and including things that aren't really connected with Hemel Gardens communities? I understand there's the transport implications and things can't be dealt with in their own right, but I do wonder if by trying to include, I mean, Shendish isn't even in the Two Waters and opportunity area to start with. And I have to say, when I was told by a brief who'd referred to the Hemel Gardens Community Project in reference to HM11, I said, well, hang on a minute, they've got nothing to do with each other, what's going on here? So I am worried that by stretching the project, is there any danger of it becoming denuded?
So the reasons that it covers the whole of the town is down to the fact that we submitted a garden communities bid, but it was a transformational one. It wasn't just about the growth area site, it was about transforming Hemel Hempstead at the same time. And you can't transform a place without providing the appropriate infrastructure, and that's on quite a spectrum as well. And in terms of the infrastructure delivery plan, the cost of it is quite significant. So to make sure that it was a viable infrastructure delivery plan to support the local plans, not just Dacorum but St Albans, it was felt necessary to make sure that all of the sites were contributing to that infrastructure that they would be using or have use of, those residents would have use of. So that is almost why it covers the whole area, is because of the infrastructure requirements across the town.
Sorry, this isn't an argument, but I'm just thinking, isn't that the local plan's job?
Well, this is sort of part of the local plan.
Yeah.
So this is a supplementary planning document to support the policies that are in there that we've helped draft.
I'll just leave it there. I've made my point. We shall see what happens. And I will say actually that I did write to the inspectors and ask them that if at some point they felt that they couldn't adopt the local plan, could they at least adopt the Hemel Gardens Community Project part of it? So that gives you an indication of just how strongly I feel about it. In terms of recommendation, is the committee agreed to see this referred on to Cabinet?
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, stewardship.
Great, thank you very much.
Did you want to put another little mini presentation on stewardship first?
If I may just
Yes, please,
give
please
some headlines on stewardship and placemaking. So stewardship obviously refers to the long-term management and maintenance of our places, and over recent years there's been a lot of debate around this topic. In 2024, the Competition and Markets Authority issued a report into house building, and that considered also the emerging prevalence of private estate management companies, noting there are a number of concerns around their operation, including high charges, including administration costs, a lack of transparency, little or no provision for one-off repairs, and embedded management companies, which leave residents with little recourse for poor performance. They're unable effectively to vote with their feet. In response, the House Builders Federation noted a significant reduction in adoption of infrastructure, noting that in the past 3 years on schemes of over 10 units, only 10% of roads and 3% of sewers had actually been adopted, leaving the obligation to manage and maintain those pieces of infrastructure with private estate management company and costs to be met by residents. In response to that, in December, the government launched a public consultation, and this is entitled Reducing the Prevalence of Private Estate Management Arrangements, specifically looking at addressing improved transparency, improving safeguards of dispute resolution, and prohibiting those embedded arrangements, but also looking at the potential of mandatory adoption of key infrastructure. And that consultation will run through to March of this year. Finally, just to note that Decorum doesn't currently have a policy position for stewardship, and therefore it's currently delivered primarily across the borough by private estate management companies on an ad hoc basis, and that often leads to sporadic and uncoordinated approach. Larger sites, such as the Hemel Garden Community's growth areas, will require significant on-site infrastructure, including a high proportion of green space and a high-quality ambition, which will require a long-term sustainable stewardship solution. And we've sought, via the emerging draft supplementary planning document, to consider what that might look like. The programme area presents a number of challenges to stewardship delivery. Fundamentally it spans 2 local authority areas, with the land use of Hemel Hempstead falling within St Albans administrative area, but it also covers 4 existing parishes. It includes the strategic and opportunity area sites, as we've just touched upon, and has multiple landowners, including the Crown Estate, who consider themselves to be a legacy landlord, and the expansion of Maylands and Hearts IQ. And a key tenet of the draft supplementary planning document is therefore to seek to deliver a unified approach and avoid a plethora of individual private estate management companies. So what has guided the supplementary planning document? The draft SPD has evolved over the last few years, and it's been guided by best practice from the Town and Country Planning Association and the Garden Communities Programme. It's guided by the Hemel Garden Communities Spatial Vision, which has a key objective to create one place, and it seeks to address head-on the inadequacies of the current status quo. It's had input from extensive stakeholders, engagement, including our Stewardship Advisory Group, landowners, and the Hemel Garden Communities Council Review Group, but also the Hemel Garden Communities Delivery Board, and input from legal and sector specialists. The supplementary planning document aims to deliver the following benefits. It aims to encourage strong governance and transparency, provide an effective long-term management for non-adopted assets, which may include, for example, biodiversity, net gain and SANG. It has a strong funding proposal, ideally with a mix of income streams, including service charges, developer endowments, asset revenues, and fundamentally with a sinking fund to ensure renewal is planned for upfront. It also aims to provide value for money to residents as a not-for-profit organisation and benefits from economies of scale. It encourages community participation and involvement through the board and provides for consistent quality standards, whether they be KPIs or SLAs, and recourse in the event of non-delivery, and ideally beyond place management to community development. Through extensive engagement with chief officers, lead members and stakeholders, draft recommendations were established for the stewardship strategy, and these are to provide a single town-wide model as a mandatory approach. As I mentioned, it should be a not-for-profit organisation contributing to best value for residents, a board with local authority and community representation at its heart, quality controls, a sustainable mixed income model, and setup and resourcing costs to be supported by developer contributions. And through our work to date, we've identified 2 potential stewardship mechanisms that could achieve these principles, potentially moving to a charitable status. In terms of next steps, as Natalie mentioned, in parallel with the Framework and Transformation SPD, we'd like to go to public consultation, subject to all requisite approvals, in February and March for 6 weeks. St Albans will also be seeking their approval, again at their Planning, Policy and Climate Change Committee on the 19th of this month, to go out to consultation on the strategy, and we will collate responses and update and refine the supplementary planning document accordingly, reporting back on a recommended approach for adoption in due course, noting the 30th of June deadline. Having identified the principles we wish to secure, we will continue to work and develop and refine that stewardship mechanism and undertake due diligence. We would also like to establish a working group to do this to enable its early establishment of the Stewardship Board and the development of terms of reference, and in parallel, of course, to continue to work with landowners and the Stewardship Advisory Group. So our recommendation is as follows, that the draft supplementary stewardship and placemaking supplementary planning document be submitted to Cabinet on the 3rd of February with a recommendation for us to proceed to public consultation.
Thank you. First question is Councillor Gales from earlier. Will this prevent situations arising where people cannot get access to things which were supposed to be available, like playing fields?
So it will depend on the mechanism that's put, the management structure that's put in place. We would like to think that it would be controlled via the stewardship mechanism, and we can put the controls in place through the terms of reference, etc., to ensure access. I think another tenet of that is to make sure that through the planning approvals, so we've got the distribution, as Natalie mentioned, of the requirements for open space and for sports facilities through the framework and transformation. And when those planning applications come forward, I think it's very, very important that we ensure that the principles are put in place that ensure public access in perpetuity.
So how does that work then? I mean, what is the recourse?
So the recourse, if it's a public access, then Ross and I have been discussing this earlier in the week, whether the recourse is actually through a planning recourse in that you're not complying with your conditions is one route. But it does depend on who's managing those. One of the aspects that we might wish to consider, and we've been discussing, is whether or not some of these facilities might be run out, for example, shared facilities through schools. So of course we need to make sure that those principles are in place through that management regime as well. Very acutely aware of the concerns that are around.
Councillor Stevens is next.
Okay. Looking at the proposals, I can understand why we're coming forward with this, but can I say that I've got very strong reservations about the setting up of such a body. Now, I recognise that we've got severe problems with management companies on estates. I don't want to see something like this coming into place for such a huge area, because the management of the area, I'd rather trust a local authority managing an area like this rather than a trusteeship which can be overtaken by events with different management in time. You only have to look at what's taken place with City and Guilds, for example, where they have sold off part of their fundraising capability and special strengths. You know, it's been around for decades, and all of a sudden we're losing one of the key planks to it. I'd hate to see something like that coming through with a body that doesn't have the values that's going to survive into the future. Crown estates I can understand, but again, they can be pretty hard about what they do and how they manage. But if I've got leaps and leaps on our local areas, I want to make sure that the public at large can have access to that without them fighting the local residents who are paying the service charges for maintaining them.
I think there's a balance to be had. I think what we're trying to highlight here is that there seems to be a reticence historically to adopt a lot of these assets, and it's about putting in place a management regime for those non-adopted assets. There is certainly nothing to preclude the adoption going forward, and in that respect we're trying to keep an element of flexibility so that should the authorities wish to adopt those, they can do that. This is a case of picking up those items that are non-adopted. I think is probably the principle.
Right. Could I just go on?
Yeah, right. Carry on, because I've got something off the back.
I'd far rather have a situation where the default is adoption than an opt-in.
Councillor Santa Maria.
Thank you. So my question from earlier really, I think it's partly been answered, but with roads, normal residential roads, are they going to be adopted by the local authority, or are they going to be adopted by a community group? Because if it's, you know, the issues I've run into are things like bin collections, parking enforcement, which would generally be done by the local authority and not by a local community group. So what's the plan there?
So we would encourage the Highways Authority to adopt the roads, but in the event, I think what I've tried to demonstrate here is that there is a growing trend of non-adoption, particularly on state roads. So we would expect the sustainable transport corridor, for example, certainly to be adopted, but there may be smaller roads, more residential streets that there is a reticence to adopt, in which case the management company would take those forward.
Right, okay. I think there'd be issues there. I know of, there's a road just around the corner actually where they can't seem to do anything about parking enforcement because it's an unadopted road. But they were unaware of.
Seymour Crescent?
No, it's Decorum Way, thank you. And I don't think anyone, even when I've spoken to the management company, they didn't seem to really understand what the issue was. So I think there's, I think often they don't realise there's a problem until there's a problem. But other than that, it seems to be, I think the either the umbrella stewardship body or the stewardship hub approaches seem to be, a positive idea, but I just wouldn't necessarily expect them to do things like bin collection and parking enforcement and things like that.
It's the non-statutory functions and the non-adopted functions. Yeah. It's the sort of bits in between, isn't it, that don't get picked up. I think one of the examples I was thinking about earlier in the week is, for example, secure cycle storage, weatherproof storage. There are some elements qualitatively that we are really seeking to encourage developers to bring forward. But we are very aware that those are items that would not typically be cannot afford to be adopted, and so therefore having an additional service charge over and above that can manage and maintain those. I mean, what we're trying to do here is really stop some of that bad practice and make sure it is much more transparent, much better value for money, noting that there will be some aspects, and it did actually come out of the government consultation. One of the things they talk about in consulting upon mandatory adoption, which I think here around the table everyone's very supportive of, is that there may be specialist features over and above the norm or exclusive features that need to be funded in a different way. And this is just trying to make sure that that structure is as fair and transparent as it can be.
One concern that sort of just occurred to me really is I would also not want us to see moving towards what they have in the States with homeowners associations, where they're very prescriptive about how people are allowed to keep their gardens and outdoor space and how their house is allowed to look and things like that. Is there any kind of provision for preventing that from setting in?
Yes, that would be picked up under the management regime for the estate itself, as you say, because I know I've seen it elsewhere. I've seen a lot of it in Ireland, where it's about sort of what you can and can't store on your balcony and those.
Law cut to a certain length.
I don't think we'll be getting. Hopefully, we won't get that far.
Councillor Gale, do you want to come back?
Well, yes. I mean, I have some concerns based on the service charge, and it's sort of more to do with and it's sort of to do with cohesion between the residents of the new part of Hemel Hempstead and the rest of us. Most of us live in an adopted place where we pay our council tax, we pay our parking charges if we park, and these people will have to do that as well. They'll have to pay council tax, they'll have to pay the parking charge, but in addition to that, they will also have to pay some sort of service charge, often secured by a charge on their property, meaning effectively it's not rent, but it's, if you don't pay it, you could lose your home. So it's almost like leasehold for these people. And they will be in a situation where, I mean, presumably there'll be things like major works bills and all kinds of things. There's all sorts of statutory protection for leaseholders with major works and consultation. I don't know, this is quite a new thing. I don't know if there'll be any built-in safeguards for whopping great bills suddenly that these people will get. The experience at the moment of people with management companies is that very often they buy a very expensive property, and then they know that they might be aware of a service charge. The solicitors might or might not have advised them well or not, but then they come and they're faced with these bills, which are for the upkeep of the local area. And they pay through the nose for something. They pay higher rates than they would if it were a local authority because they don't have the economies of scale. And they feel that having paid for the upkeep of their local area, they feel a greater sense of ownership of their local area in a not so good way than we do, the rest of us, who understand that this is public space. So, for example, there's an estate near in my ward, which actually, as a matter of law, and I checked into this, has a right of way. It's got public space. It was all in the planning documents. It's all supposed to be public. But you try telling the residents that. They pay for all this stuff. There are signs. They've put signs up which say no unauthorised parking, no entry. Now, these signs have no, they've no right to be there. They're very divisive. People walking their dogs, approaching these things, will see these no entry signs, and it does become a little bit like, our stereotype view of parts of America where trespassers will be, well, all sorts of things, and that kind of lack of social cohesion where people are excluded. And there's almost two classes of resident. There's those of us who actually get direct benefit from our council tax, know that our road's adopted, and then the newcomers who don't feel that they're really connected to us. So this is all, I have serious concerns about the notion of non-adoption. I notice that there are other options that are there, including parish council adoption and authority adoption. It seems to me that there's an opportunity with local government reorganisation, because we're going to go to unitary authority, and then there's some flexibility with what happens beneath that. So there's talk of parishing unparished areas, or actually perhaps having a Hemel Town Council, which would give cohesion to that. And it seems to me that it seems to be the job of local authority. Historically, it's the job of local authority to maintain the area under its control. And that's what, in theory, that's what council tax is there for. So, which is all paid. And it seems to be almost sort of giving up on the capabilities of local authority to look after this area by saying, well, we can't do it. We're going to set up this body which is accountable, may be accountable to a degree. I don't think it's likely to be as democratically accountable as a local authority. Even on a charity, there aren't necessarily terms of office. I don't know how prescriptive we can be in terms of that, but charities they're not the most democratic organisations, and it seems to me we're putting something in place that really ought not to need to be put in place, because it should be the local authority that does it. I'll stop now.
No. Do you want to answer that specifically, or shall I invite someone else?
There's a lot there. Can I try and
go
a few of them as best I can? So I think the key concern probably is one of affordability, that the council tax, with due respect, isn't sufficient to manage and maintain those areas to the standards that we wish to see. The garden community, particularly the growth areas, is a significant green area over and above what would normally be expected in urban areas as we currently see today. So you can imagine the cost of managing and maintaining those elements is greater. In terms of your point, so the charges on property, one of the things to note from that government consultation, which I'm sure I will be tasked with starting with the draft off for in response, is to stop that, to make sure that that doesn't happen, and also provide controls on inflation so that residents have some assurances about the increases that they should be expecting over time, and there are caps imposed. So that's one thing that should be coming forward. You mentioned the sort of unforeseen bills point. That was the point about the sinking fund. So that is to ensure that the charges over time, so resident that moves in on year 15, the year before something goes wrong, isn't responsible wholly for their 1 year's occupation for contributing their share to that, but the residents throughout time, from day one contribute a small proportion that is built up and invested such that in the event of unforeseen repairs, there is money available, and that's the function of the sinking fund. And that's one of the principles that we've sought to put in the supplementary planning document. You mentioned the sort of value for money point and economies of scale. I mean, one of the principles of us trying to have a board that covers a larger area is to make sure that we can benefit from those economies of scale through any instructions placed. And also the administration costs. So one of the problems with the existing private estate management company is administration costs can be up to 50% of those costs. That would not be the case in this instance, and that is why we wanted it to be not-for-profit organisation to make sure that that doesn't happen. You mentioned parish councils. I think just a couple of observations on that, or considerations. We've obviously, I know there are examples elsewhere, for example, in Chelmsford, they have a parish council. There's a slight difference here in that we have this cross-boundary issue. So in advance of local government reorganisation, there wouldn't be a possibility, is my understanding, of putting a single parish in place, because it actually crosses those boundaries. And I mentioned earlier, we already have 4 parish councils currently covering that growth area. We are aware of the government's review that's ongoing, but clearly until the outcomes of those are concluded, we don't know where that's going. And as I mentioned earlier, some of these sites are coming forward early, and what we're trying to do is prevent the natural assumption that be a private estate management company, and that we have an alternative that tries to address some of these key issues. Finally, just in terms of, again, sort of considerations about parish or town council options, we obviously have a complex and quite aspirational scheme, and that has a requirement for quite specific skills and capacity to support things such as the SANG delivery, management of the SANG areas, and the biodiversity net gain. And my understanding is typically that a parish council wouldn't normally stretch to aspects such as that. There would still be a requirement for adoption of some infrastructure. We've touched upon the roads, and also, and sewerage. And again, that's not something typically I understand a parish council would take on board. So you would have multiple levels, a higher level adoption of those items than potentially a parish council. And just to note, Chelmsford also has a service charge under their parish council, so you're actually going to have sort of 3 different levels in that scenario, potentially, to cover those costs. I'll leave it there. I was, yeah, economies of scale with the multiple parishes is the point I was going to say.
Councillor Walker was next. I have seen the other hands.
I'll keep it short, because Councillor Gillies, I think, hit everything that I was about to say. In a perfect world, I can see where we're coming from with this. I mean, the developer builds whatever, moves on, not their problem. People move in, have a small service charge, even if it's, if you're building a sinking fund. 10, 15, 20 years from now, you mentioned the cap. What happens when the cap doesn't reach what's going to be paid for? I mean, on a housing estate in Bovingham, we have some drainage which has got to be cleared every 5 years. 150 odd houses will contribute towards it. But you can see that in the future being a huge problem. I mean, it's very easy to sit in a room like this tonight and think the service charge will cover it. But I think what we're doing is actually reinventing leasehold again on freehold property. And that's exactly what we're doing. There's a separate charge there to cover things that, I live in a housing estate that was built in the 70s. The one next door to me is built now. I won't pay that, they do. And I think you could see a difference in property prices and the fact that you don't have control. I mean, you say a management company, we all know that these things are very hard to get to the bottom of where the money's being spent. And indeed, this afternoon, or this morning, the BBC ran an article with people who bought houses who are now screaming the fact that their service charge has trebled in 3 years. And they say, we were never told. And when they apply to find out what the money's been spent on, they say, they don't get a list. It's just hidden behind a smokescreen. And I think that's a dangerous place to go. I think it should be a default option that it comes to the council. And if you don't run it, then you administer somebody who does run it, and it is run very carefully. I mean, if we're going to have things that we want, it has to be paid for. But I think it has to be abundantly clear that people moving into these areas or associated with these areas know fully well what they're taking on. Because I will say that any lawyer selling a property will probably turn around and say, it's a service charge, it won't go up much, it'll be fine. You know, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. They want to buy the house, they fall in love with the house, they don't hear that. But in 10, 15 years' time, when you're spending a lot of money and it's not there, that's when things start going wrong. And if people haven't got it, you know, put interest rates back to 10%, you know, tomorrow. People now have student debt to pay when they buy houses. They have so much more, they have pension contributions to make. All these things come in, which were never there when I went out to buy a house. And another little bit of service charge on top, I think is it's the fact it can't be accounted and it has to be controlled so well. But that's what worries me.
Councillor Janikowski, you were trying to...
Don't have to come back on that, you know, there's no need.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. I anticipated that. Councillor
Thank you. Just a quick question on the sort of public consultation side of things. You mentioned, I think, February to March, so I just wanted to understand what that would look like, to what extent that will be consulted on alongside what we discussed in the previous item, because I think it's important that residents have the opportunity to probably have their say, so I'd be keen to understand what that looks like, how we're publicising that to areas, etc.
Thank you. So we're currently finalising arrangements for our consultation events, but at the moment we're looking at 3 in-person events. So one would be held probably in Leverstock Green. We're looking at another one in Redbourne Parish, obviously noting that this is a cross-boundary aspect, so that would be in Redbourne. But also holding potentially an event here in the forum for residents to drop in and talk to us. We'll also be using our best endeavours through social media, etc., to make sure our reach is as far as possible, so people are fully aware, and we'll be promoting it fully.
We, unless anybody else got to speak, for me personally, this is a critical subject. It is really important. It might be very mundane, to especially those who aren't familiar with it. Oh, sorry, did Councillor England want to?
I indicated earlier, Chair, I thought you'd
All
seen
right,
me.
so do you want to, and then I'll start for a minute.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, instinctively, I think I'm probably on a similar page to Councillor Stevens. But the National Planning Policy Framework allows management companies to exist. So I think if we don't step in to try and get something that's better than the default, then we run the risk of getting the default in like 10 different versions across the town. I don't want that. Council tax, I had quite a conversation with Section 151 officer a while back, and he explained to me that council tax is meant to be for statutory services. Statutory services includes a whole load of things, but it doesn't include clean, safe and green. And we want this urban extension, we aim for it to be attractive. So there's a gap there. And this allows us to overcome that without having the worst possible outcome of the management companies. I dare say, to be fair to management companies, there are probably loads of management companies around that don't go down this black hole. But I don't want to repeat myself on that. Then we come to the SPD. The SPD goes with the local plan for adoption. If we don't get this through consultation and adopted, then again we default to management companies until such time as the government comes along and bans management companies, which they may do, but we have absolutely no control about when they might do that. They might decide they're too busy with LGR and they haven't got time for anything else, and they might never do it. And in the meantime, we would have missed our opportunity to do this. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, parish council for that area does not exist. So we can't go to the developers and say, there's a parish council over here that credibly could take this on. We're not in a position to do that. So I absolutely think that we should try and get ourselves in a position to do that. And then it comes to my clarification question, perhaps for the benefit of the room. What's the relationship between the government consultation that's currently going on and potential legislation? What I mean by that is, if we go ahead with this and we move our default to this, one of these two, the umbrella or the other one, what happens then if the government says, right, we're not having any of that anymore, everyone's going to be adopted?
My understanding would be that the government legislation would overrule anything that was put in place in the meantime. So therefore, if there were estate management charges that were deemed not to comply with that legislation, they would be enforced to do so. But obviously, we have to wait for that legislation to come.
So this reads to me like a fairly prudent situation in the interim.
I would, sorry, very briefly, because we've got 4 more items, but
Yes, thank you. This will be brief. Just a question on that. Is it possible to sort of future-proof it so that it's almost like a ratchet? I can understand that this idea is adopted because it's better than management companies, but we can't quite get to adoption. But if there a way, because it seems to me the timing is wrong, because we're in the middle of local government reorganisation, we don't know what the situation is going to be. Is an actual way of beefing up the future-proofing of it?
I guess the point is that it would be a material consideration for determination of any applications. But I'm sure that if the council were to step up and come forward and say, we're prepared to adopt these specific assets, or the authority as it were at the time, then I cannot see any reason why any developer would not jump at that chance.
I agree 100% with Councillor England that we've got to have something in the form of stewardship. As he's eloquently pointed out, I still bear the scars of a massive row that broke out over the playground at the rear of the Welcome Trust site in Berkhamsted years ago, when one of the swings broke and nobody was responsible for repairing it, and the council had to close the playground, and the residents took it very badly. So you've got to have stewardship to avoid all the problems. I think we've glossed over something quite important, particularly in relation to highways. The reason why developers are not getting their new residential roads adopted is because they have to pay a fee for it. If we have a system in place which actually through this SPD requires the developers to get roads adopted, I think that would be a very good thing to do. Forgive me if it's actually in there. I did speed read it earlier, but I think that's something that really needs to do. In terms of non-highways, things like playgrounds, I would argue grass cutting certainly is a statutory requirement. In terms of size, I share colleagues' reservations about setting up a huge area, although you have made a point about economy of scale. But I'll come back to a resolution for that. Whatever happens, there must be some kind of service charge to pay for it. You can't meet the costs from the one-off developer contribution. And members have touched on this, the complications of some residents paying for something and others not. And you start getting, I mean, we went through all of this with parish councils and concurrent services. It's a really horrible place to go. And the simplest thing to do is just to make it local authority. It solves so many problems. But obviously, what keeps coming back to affordability. In terms of the parish councils, Councillor Stevens and I sit on the Electoral Review Committee, and there is a community governance review which is going to the Scrutiny meeting tomorrow night. There's an opportunity here where the residents, there aren't any residents yet, so you don't have to consult them. You could actually name the communities in your development plots, give them names now, and actually set up those parish councils now. There is an opportunity to do that as part of the review we're undertaking. So I'll throw that in for yourselves and the Cabinet to consider. I think the committee is broadly obviously supportive of this report going to Cabinet, and the Cabinet looks at this. And I just hope the Cabinet can take our views on board, because there are issues that members have raised, problems with the favoured option here. And we do need perhaps a bit more persuasion from our point of view that you're not going to get the problems we're talking about before we can give it 101% support. In the meantime, are members of the committee supportive this goes to Cabinet?
With qualifications.
With qualifications. Councillor Holton.
Very, very brief.
Yeah.
And it's not your fault that the agenda's so big. I had a heart attack when I looked at it. Just thinking about when it comes to management, when you mentioned green spaces, just have a thought about whether there are any organisations already existing that have that expertise. Boxmoor Trust is one. You'd have to gift the land to them or have something like that. I don't know whether it would work, but it's something that you could. You just need to think about. Sports space was under council control, and eventually it ended up in the private hands. So you need to be careful if that's what's going. Is that the trajectory that we want the council to own things? But certainly in Hemel, you do have at least one that has the expertise, and whether you might want to work with other charitable organisations to deliver that. I don't have to answer that because I know we need to move on the agenda.
Just say though, a stewardship advisory group includes Boxmoor Trust, Sunnyside, etc. So we've got all those partners on board, and they to help us with this board that was
not being
those
registered. There are other options potentially.
Thank you.
Stefania, you wanted to say a quick word?
Yeah, on behalf of Di, I just wanted to reassure this committee that this report, the purpose of this report is to go to Cabinet, to go to consultation. There will be further considerations, including all the considerations that obviously have been raised today, also through consultation with the general public. So it's just to reassure members that this is the first step.
Okay, with that proviso, is everyone happy? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting if you don't mind. Right,
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
Item 9. Biodiversity duty. Who's going to, sorry, Stefan.
That'll be me. Thank you, Chair. So this report it explains the need of a new requirement, which is the extended biodiversity duty that was introduced under the Environmental Act 2021. The new duties includes items, for example, like the nature recovery strategies and biodiversity net gains. And as part of this duty, the local councils need to publish a progress report on action taken to preserve biodiversity, considerations, etc. This report would work on a 5-year cycle. So once you've got this progress report, then the report will highlight what's been done to date and what the intentions is for the next 5 years. Obviously, we are in the middle of LGR, so this next one would be considered by the new authority. But this was a really useful exercise to really take stock and understand the assets that the forum has in terms of nature recovery. The report includes the legal and national policy, includes the state of nature for the quorum, the integrated action progressed to date, tools for protecting and enhancing biodiversity, including biodiversity net gain, a strategic approach for funding. So how do we then make sure that we can do the next steps? Looking at our priorities as well. It's quite comprehensive, and it was a really useful exercise to understand actually that the Coron is in a really good place. We've got great biodiversity assets. We do have good quality spaces, very good quality nature conservation spaces managed quite well, particularly some protected areas like SSSIs, the site of scientific interests. We've got strong strategic framework, strong partnerships, and a good base of community engagement. So we're starting from a really good point. We had recently a seminar that had a really good attendance and really good participation. The local nature recovery strategy is being published. This is led by Hertfordshire County Council. And obviously, whatever we do at local level, we're going to be guided strategically by that strategy. We want to continue to improve the work so far and strengthen the engagement in the partnerships. So I hope you had the chance to read the documents. This evening with me is also Steve Werrell, who is going to be our lead in terms of moving forward this subject, because there are lots of synergies and integrations with SANG, as well as doing particularly fantastic work already on SANG side, and work very closely with planning too. So that's a really good way of moving forward. And the recommendation of this report for scrutiny is to note and agree the progress report.
Did you want anything to add anything, Steve? Did you want anything to?
No, I think that's
fine. Question, Councillor Dennis.
Thank you. Looking at page 579, this current status of green and so on, we obviously rely in this area very heavily, I would say, on the Chiltern beachwoods and our areas of what I still retain call the AONB rather than Chiltern natural landscapes. It sounds better, I think. There are two things. One, I noticed on item 2.7, you mentioned coastal, and I'm not so sure that, do we have any coastal?
Some erosion. That would be some erosion.
No. Sorry.
I'm quite surprised to see that. And the other item, 2.6, is that 50% of our area is green belt. Now, is that still the case, given we're sacrificing so much of it to building?
So the stats are taken from the national statistics in terms of, and also the current stats that we've got. Obviously, this is a moving figure, and that's why also the report is on a 5-year cycle and needs to be reviewed annually, because obviously these figures will change depending on the state of nature, development,
so this is the current situation.
This is the current.
Despite the fact we've got a national plan that's building over.
This is the current. That's the current. I mean,
so that's the current situation. So what will be the situation with the plan that's going ahead?
Do you have any stats on that?
I don't have an exact number, but I don't think it's that significant in terms of number. It might look quite a lot in terms of the amount of development, but I don't think it's more than a few percent difference.
It will not impact on it.
I think it's quite a lot, but anyway. There's the two things I would just like to mention about it. I'm very keen on this. I'm very keen that we should be encouraging greenness and biodiversity, but especially as a country, we have a very low, compared to other countries, our wildlife and so on levels are extremely low. And so I think this is important.
Can I just come in quickly on the coastal point? Coastal and floodplain grazing marsh, it's a habitat description, which is basically wet areas of grazing marsh. So it's confusing.
It's confusing. Misleading. You could say marshy or something like that.
We will take it out because it's confusing. Although it's a technical term, it's confusing.
It just looks like somebody has just taken it out, AI perhaps.
Any other questions before I bring in Councillor Bryan? Councillor Bryan?
I'd just like to thank the officers for this great work. I know this is really important to a lot of our residents, and having this, well, it's really reference material because it's stating what has been achieved and what we have as a borough. So it's really putting our position forward and recognising what has been done and what's going to be done as well. So I think it's a good promotion for decorum as well.
Thank you. I agree, but I noticed, Philip's run away, but Ross is still here. My only comment about this report and moving forward as to how things could be improved is that I do think it doesn't really bring planning into it. Planning is absolutely critical to the amount of biodiversity net gain we're going to get. And I would have thought the report might have had a bit more about planning, what council's doing via the planning process, to really max out what we can, notwithstanding there are things we can and can't do on the planning policy. But I would hope that in the future, moving forward, as look at improving, extending this perhaps to include more to do with planning.
Yeah, so we can't, and the new NPPF makes this very clear, is that we can't go beyond what the statutory provisions are in relation to biodiversity net gain, and we are still awaiting the outcome of the DEFRA consultation on biodiversity net gain and planning.
10 houses or less.
Yes, essentially, and potentially some other changes in terms of those, what they're calling the medium development, so 10 to 49 homes as well. Still waiting to hear exactly what that's going to include and how that will play out. So at this stage, we've kept it fairly high level, just referring to the relevant policies. The other thing that's also fair to say is that the BNG regime was very quickly implemented, and the back office process, and this isn't just Decorum, this is generally the back office process for monitoring and managing BNG, and what is a very unwieldy beast if you let it get away from you, has meant that we are still playing catch up a little bit in terms of how we manage and monitor BNG provision. So at the moment it's based on what we have, but we are looking at how we can best manage and monitor that better so that we can then provide more in the reports going forward. With the prospect of a government reorganisation, we haven't looked at procuring some specific fancy software because we don't think it's necessary at this stage. But when we kind of know a bit more about what the LGR position is, then we'll talk to our kind of partners around how we might do that. So
if this could be an early candidate for the new authority to look at, that would be grand. Because I mean, I attended seminars at County Hall about what Hertfordshire's done under this heading a few years back now. When I was in County Bromwich Shoes, and if Hertfordshire is no longer there, then we're going to have to work with whatever we end up with to try and keep this moving forward. Any other questions? No? I'm sorry to have kept you here all night. It's such a short item. But thank you. I hope you can understand how important this is to members and how much we're supporting what you're doing.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Item 10, parking solutions. Ian. Oh, sorry, Ian is flagging.
Are you going to talk it through that?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
this
Do it.
first?
Right. The highlight of your evening. So this is just an update on parking solutions that I previously presented to this committee on. So purpose of the update is to update on the work that's been done to assess all sites put forward under the policy, to confirm the top 15 sites that will move forward to feasibility and delivery stage as part of phase 1, to outline the next steps for those schemes eligible under the policy but not ranked in the top 15, and just to outline options where funding may be limited for using SIL. So as you're aware, the policy was adopted in October 2024 and was supersedes the verge hardening policy that was suspended in 2022. Decorum, particularly Hemel Hempstead's got high parking stress in residential areas that's causing verge damage, footway obstruction and safety risks. There is some new legislation or guidance that the government's issued in the last week around footpath parking legislation, which I'm following up with Dan Roger in parking services, but the policy introduced a 5-step process for assessing and prioritising requests made under this. So since July 2025, we had a project manager working on this, significant work's been undertaken. So we originally had 99 requests, but we've assessed 102 locations and we've got 80 of those schemes have progressed to prioritisation. So top 15 are in, I think it's Appendix 3, lists all the 80 schemes and their priority, but the top 5 which we want to take forward as priority and fast track is Quinces Croft, which is in Gavebridge, Bennett's End Close in Bennett's End, Belsize Rose in Leverstock Green, Maple Green in Cholden, Warner's End, and Datchwood Turn in Leverstock Green. And they score high, and part of that is we believe that we can deliver those relatively easy. Budget, we've got £1.21 million budget that's allocated to this scheme, and we estimate that can deliver 25 to 30 schemes, unless we get additional funding or funding comes forward through SIL.
The average cost under the previous scheme was £30.5 thousand per scheme. But as part of this report, we're recommending that we put it's not a cap, but if a scheme's going to cost over £70,000, we start doing a bit more work in terms of cost benefit, because we could quite easily eat up the budget quite quickly on one scheme. So that's this proposal. Still, contributions will be very welcome, but they won't override the prioritisation ranking. So if a councillor can't just put forward their still money to try and jump the queue, for want of a better word. And then in terms of risks, obviously we've got resident expectations, and that's something Angela and myself have already briefly discussed by email, but we've got a lot of people who have, I suppose, seen this as a solution to a lot, but the low rank, so we're going to have to manage those resident expectations. We will be looking where possible to use permeable surfacing to try and avoid things like or add to flood risk, things like that. And then in terms of the next steps, so obviously we are in January, we're just signing off the project initiation document for that, and then January, February we'll start to commission design works. February, March we'll do some local engagement. March, April we'll finalise design, and we're hoping to deliver this by the Herts County Council ringway contracts, and then through spring and autumn we ought to start delivering those first 5 schemes. And as part of this, we're proposing that in 1 year's time, or sooner if you wish, we'll bring back a further update report for councillors to note, hopefully, what we've done and the success stories.
With photographs.
With photographs.
Councillor Mitchell.
I just really wanted to congratulate you and your team, Ian, on this excellent and very thorough assessment work that's been undertaken, and I particularly appreciate how it supports fairness and transparency with the process that you've used. So I just wanted to say that. And also, what page are the 100 that have been ranked? I can't see it in ranked order anywhere. I might be missing it.
Page 619.
619.
I've got
6.5.
651 is the first,
Yeah.
96, and then 652 is where all the 80 schemes that went through are prioritised.
Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah, thank you very much. No, it's great work. Really pleased to see this coming forward now.
I'm not seeing any, sorry, Paul comes in. I too share the observation that a huge amount of work has gone into this. I'm trying to avoid mentioning individual sites, but what I will say is there is one site there that was dismissed under stage 2, page 616, which was all ready to go, all planned, all consulted, all ready, and it met all the things in stage 2, and for some reason it's been dismissed. So maybe that's something I can take offline with you and discuss another time. Councillor Bromman.
Yeah, just relate my thought process on this. It's been going on for a long time. So we've seen a lot of damage to verges, parking congestions, and we get obstruction of pavements and roads. Disabled residents can't get about, and verges have become quagmires and bin lorries, missed collections. But considering the 2020 parking SPD, Supplementary Planning Document, I think there's still likely to be parking stress with the amount of car ownership that we have at the moment, that we've had historically. So the long-term solutions really have to be about reduction of reliance on cars, because this won't do that to the extent that is really needed to make a good borough. And so we need active and sustainable travel and localised facilities as much as possible in terms of schools and work. So some sites have an obvious need, but they're just not feasible, which is really unfortunate. We have quite a few houses that without street frontage at all, and they were originally designed with parking capacity in the garage blocks behind the houses. Now some of those have been sold off, and had more houses built on them, and some have even been converted into with privatised parking control, which have all exacerbated the problem, and they've used up the available space. So that's why there's not much remedy anymore. So the capital was accumulated by the previous administration with their verge hardening project, which and that kind of ground to a halt, and then the 1.2 million accumulated. So although it really pains me to be tarmacking or putting permeable hard surfaces where we had nice green space before, I think for the quality of life of our residents, we do actually need to implement this as an interim measure. And so we rekindled the project as parking solutions. And the most important thing that I wanted was for it to be done objectively. And I know that Ian went into an immense amount of work to generate those selection criteria to make sure that the sites were not selected by lobbying. And so I thank the officers very much in progressing the project in the way that I envisaged.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I mean, it's very, very thorough work. I'm just asking about the timescale because it seems like those first 5 will be done kind of by the end of the year, and then that seems a bit slow. I'm wondering, well, sorry to put a dampener on it, but it seems like if we're going to do 5 a year, there's quite a lot to get through, and there'll be more, won't there?
No, I'd envisage doing more than the 5. This is the I suppose it's the first 5 we want to get delivered, but I would hope by the end of the summer we've delivered those first 15 in that.
I'd certainly hope so, because I think we've only got 2 years to do this. And the money's there, it's been there all the while, it's just getting people to run it. That's the problem. Cousin Walker?
Just going to ask a question, you've got 2 years to do it. Where do you think you'll end up on the list when you're ranking? How far do you think you'll get down? What?
I mean, if you go by, I think when I did some sums, allowing for some inflation based on the previous schemes at 30,500, I think we're going to get between 25 and 30 schemes delivered.
So I'm at 16, so that's right. 17, so it's gone up.
I'm all right, James.
I'm all right, yeah. Good answer.
Great, love that. Any other questions, Councillor Timmis?
Just in response to Robin Brennan's speech just now, I'd just like to point out that whilst I agree that it would be lovely if everybody got on their bikes and didn't have cars and the rest of it, you have to look, and this is much more possible in London and in Amsterdam, places like that, but actually when it comes to living out in the villages and in some of the towns where you've got steep hills going down to the valley like Berkhamsted, it isn't so easy just to say you need to use your bike. It really isn't. And we've also got a situation these days where people, certainly in Market, we have businesses whose jobs, like working perhaps for DPD or something like that, their vans come with them. So that when they're parking, they're not only parking their car outside the house, but also their van. And so we have a lot of congestion. And then when you get into areas of conservation, you've also got houses that were built before cars were even considered. So there is no parking for cars other than on the street. So I think that whilst I agree with you, it's actually very difficult to roll out that concept into parts of this parts of the court.
Yeah, I'll allow Councillor Brodden the briefest response to that, and then we'll move on.
I agree. There's a lot of challenges. Like I said, this is not going to fix the problem. I really hope the government uses its creativity. I'm an engineer, so I can envisage creative things, but politically they've got to be made to happen. We need things like really small electric vehicles, that 20 mile per hour speed limits that make it safe to drive around in quadricycle type things. We need a lot more public transport, probably smaller vehicles, all sorts of stuff. So,
Councillor Sillington, briefly.
Thank you. Coming back to the report, Ian, is there any form of consultation process, or is it assumed that every resident wants this?
We will do some, I'll call it engagement rather than consultation as part with every scheme. So.
Thank you.
Right, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you very much, Ian.
Yes, well done.
Item 12 to do with e-bike hire. It's a bit complicated. Some of it's part 1 and some of it's part 2. For reasons of simplicity, I'm going to propose from the chair we move to part 2 and do the whole thing in part 2. Is that seconded?
Agreed, yes.
Agreed?
Yep, agreed.